being creative with, what resources you have available and like how your time goes is maybe the biggest thing, where like a biotech company doesn't have to start out by like dropping out of your PhD program and like going full steam towards something that you're not sure about.
If this AI revolution, will it reduce number of experiments or increase number of wet lab experiments? Right? I was telling him that it will reduce number of wet lab experiments.
The basic concept that we often use in synthetic biology is talking about, we start with the chassis, which is like yeast.
Right.
A chassis is similar as you talk about like a chassis for a car maybe or whatever,
If you have to give advice to aspiring founders, aspiring biotech founders, we need more of them for sure.
Well, I've seen like companies in California in similar fields like ours, like raise $50 million and then 2 years later they're bankrupt, like that's...
We have government funding really focus on the impact post-commercialization, not just building something, filing a patent. Shouldn't be like the last stop.
Using synthetic biology to produce light, essentially.
Produce light. Start with quick introduction. I was really looking forward to speaking with you, especially because there's like a movement in Syn Bio space. And I think there's one McKinsey report that says 70% of physical goods are going to be manufactured biologically. And I think synthetic biology is the reason that we are making these bold claims. And I know you are investing this decade and maybe next few decades on this. So would love to know more about you, your company, Hyasynth Bio, and also the community piece you're focusing on.
Definitely. And thanks for having me. I think that's I remember seeing that McKinsey report, and it's an interesting idea when you look around the room and you think about like which materials are already made by biologically and which ones could be made by biologically once you create technologies that can do that. So that's always been like a big passion of mine as far as like finding new and interesting ways to produce things and find ways to produce things that don't require any like major costs to the environment, like petroleum based alternatives and things like that, right? So by way of introduction, my career started very much in the world of biochemistry and synthetic biology, where I was interested in like, what are the foundations of life and on a molecular level, and how do we use those to create medicine? Obviously is like the most like key example, but then thinking beyond that, like what else can we produce using the synthetic biology as well? So my company Hyasynth was founded in 2014. Myself and a few friends decided that we were going to make cannabinoids using engineered yeast as opposed to growing cannabis. And this is interesting because it's a switch from, still a biological product, but it's a switch from a agricultural product to a synthetic biology solution, and one that is like much more efficient and more sustainable, and ultimately more reliable than growing cannabis. And then along that journey as well, or like maybe even before that journey, a lot of my like motivation in synthetic biology comes from just like how do we encourage and create more opportunities for scientists that are looking to, discover new things and find new medicines or create new solutions in synthetic biology. It's still a very new field, like the idea of using synthetic DNA to do different kinds of genetic engineering and all kinds of stuff, like even the sequencing of DNA, like the costs and efficiencies of doing working with DNA in general have dropped exponentially over the past 2 decades basically, and we're still learning like what is possible and what can be done with that, and how else can we take advantage of those opportunities, and what else can we do to improve human health or improve planetary health using those technologies. And so alongside while building Hyasynth, I've always kept a good tab on other startups in the space, try to be a mentor and often a mentee as well, like when I can. And love the Canadian scene for synthetic biology startups. It's always like interesting and a bit scrappy, and there's all kinds of like really cool ideas that have come out over the years. But more recently, also working on Syn Bio Canada, which is a nonprofit that's focused just on building the community in synthetic biology here, and that's been a super fun like journey as well, just because it's a very new and scrappy organization too, and just kind of getting started.
At what point you decided to start a company? It's a wrong time to lose my voice,
That's right.
So what time, like whether you were in the lab, like what was that turning point when you decided or made a decision to start a company, and why cannabinoid? Like what made you decide, let's start with cannabis product and then to other agriculture products? Or
Yeah, I think the moment I decided to start a company was back when I was finishing up my undergrad. I was, had done a good like thesis project, did some research in a lab there with the professor and stuff. And when we were talking about careers for future scientists, that was where like I would have, there was a slide that my professor put up on the screen that said like, oh, like you can go to industry or you can go to academia. And those were the options, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, okay. And then you also hear things about the academic journey where it's like, well, like, 1 in 10, graduates will actually find a job in research kind of thing after you do your PhD. So it didn't look like a very like, friendly journey to go on that path and still not really end up where you want to be after all. Because all I really wanted to do was like do my own research projects and like, invent cool solutions like the one with Hyasynth essentially. And so after my undergrad, a few friends of mine started their own company that was doing genetic engineering toolkits, and they caught my eye, and I worked for them for a summertime. That gave me like the seed of like understanding like what is the startup journey like, and what can you do with that. And it just felt like I could choose between the path of like academic stuff, the path of industry stuff, or there was this new like path that nobody really knew where it went. It was kind of like an unknown. Like my friends were trying it out. It was kind of working for them. But starting synthetic biology companies, straight out of undergrad, was not like the cool thing to do. It was, starting biotech companies was for like old white people basically. And there wasn't very much startup culture in biotechnology at all. There was no like startup accelerators, there was no incubators, nothing for like biotechnology specifically. And so this opportunity came around that it was like, okay, you could try and start this company, try and be part of the world's first accelerator for synthetic biology, and see how the journey goes. And or you could continue your PhD and get your degree and then decide what you want to do from there.
Right.
And so I think I'm just maybe a very adventurous person and decided that I wanted to try that new path out and see how that goes. And that was like a really exciting time because we got started, and there weren't really like any programs for startups for biotechnology. We ended up just taking advantage of a few different things that were coming from like the software scene into synthetic biology that like were supportive for us. And then eventually this like, that first startup accelerator program that we were part of is now like one of the biggest ones in the world in terms of...
What was it?
It's called IndieBio.
IndieBio, yeah.
Yeah.
We worked with IndieBio.
Yeah, exactly.
Their companies too.
Yeah. So that's so they're the biggest one in the world right now.
Right.
But we were part of the very first cohort, like kind of a prototype version of that program. And so we got to see all these like new things come out over the years that are supporting younger people, younger startups, and startups doing really, really interesting stuff in biotechnology and synthetic biology. And so it's that's the journey, I guess.
Love it. How did IndieBio change the direction?
It was like, it was the start of the direction, really. That was sort of it, where like we heard about the opportunity to try and start a company in that way, and that sort of gave us a little bit of the seed, like starting point. I guess it would have been possible to try and learn how to raise money ourselves outside of that program and figure out the investor stuff and like how to make a pitch deck and all this other like really basic stuff. But I think for us and my team coming from pure academics, we needed to learn about what it's like to work with an investor and what it's like to pitch and what it's like to actually build a company and understand the business model and do that all in a way that is easy to communicate and easy for investors to understand. And I remember our early days of like pitching were like still very scientific. It was like even maybe our business model was like a little bit too much like a computer model as opposed to like a real like easy to understand picture of like what your business is actually doing. And so that's the kinds of things that in the IndieBio program kind of set us up on, and that was really cool.
Yeah, we had great things about IndieBio from many companies.
Yeah.
Very founder friendly. And another big network is Y Combinator.
Yep.
I think both of these groups are helping really shape the future of biotech.
Yeah.
What I love about your story is when people ask me for advice, when they should start, when they should jump in and start their own company, I say sooner the better, right? Because as you grow old or older, there are more dependencies, right? It becomes harder. You have more commitments in different directions. So sooner the better. And you will never be ready, right? If you're waiting to be completely ready to start a business, there's no such thing, right? You have to jump in and learn while doing things. You cannot just read a book and be completely ready. So from undergrad, that's really inspiring because especially in biotech, people feel like they have to do PhD or even postdoc to start something, to even have decent lab or access to resources. So like, how was that journey? So in undergrad, you made a decision to start a company. Then how do you access, let's say, lab space, capital, access to co-founders, team, equipments, bioreactors, or strains? I don't know, like so many different things. What are those pieces you have to bring together to really realize this dream of starting and scaling a company?
Very good question, and a lot of like components to that. I think we figured out a lot of that stuff on our own, basically, where it's like you use your network and your friends, and you ask around, you ask your profs, you ask your all the universities for space or for resources that they might have, let me think about like what started that off. I think because we did the IndieBio program, and that was a good start, and that gave us like initial capital to at least pay like a bit of our own like salaries essentially at the time, or living expenses. It wasn't even a real salary. It was we just covered paying like rent, and that was fine. But once we raised our first like seed round, I think we managed to raise about 500,000 US after that initial like program, and that's the capital that we used towards equipment and things. But to find those equipment, I think it was a very different journey then than it is now.
Right.
And that's like one of the biggest and most interesting things about being a mentor to a few startups these days is that they're actually like universities have programs for supporting biotech startups, or or they're willing to share more of their equipment and encourage more of that kind of like startup activity, because it is supportive of like the student body and what students want to do in general. And that's like, and it's actually also supportive of a lot of even basic research, where it's like, because people always wonder like, where do you go with your research after you've done it, and like what happens afterwards. And this is like a journey that a lot of people now understand, but I think initially it was way harder to understand maybe how research becomes a product. But I'm digressing a little bit. I think each of the pieces that we had to find was like, okay, equipment was, leftover equipment from a pharma company that shut down here. The lab space was just like extra lab space the university had in like their basement somewhere. The co-founders, like we met through some of the community type of work that I was doing here, where I was working with also my previous startup, like my friends there were building a community for doing more synthetic biology, but coming from more of a community-oriented approach, like having citizens and regular people, enthusiasts also be involved in working with biotechnology, the same way that you could have like a hackerspace for computer science, right? They were creating a lot of that. So that's how I met my co-founders, actually, was exploring.
Like through iGEM program, or? A
little bit through iGEM, because I did do iGEM for a couple of years. That was a big inspiration for me. but I think doing the citizen science and DIY bio, the sort of like biohacker stuff, was really interesting at the time in 2014 and 2013. That was when a lot of new communities were starting up and thinking about this idea of like, how do we program DNA the same way we program computers,
Right.
and encouraging a lot of that kind of exploration, which, like, is an interesting concept, and ultimately boils down to like some really cool things in like just citizen science. Just having
Right.
citizens participate in science was like one of the cool outcomes of that particular movement. But another part of that movement actually created a few different companies that were, I would say, people who were maybe in science or coming into science and having an interest in working in the space, and thinking differently about like what they want to do with their scientific careers. So obviously
Right.
the people that were showing up into the local community here for biohacking and stuff were people who were trying to find a path that's outside of academia, basically, right? And outside of industry. They weren't just, like, to some extent, maybe they were there looking for jobs and trying to figure out what their career path was, but they were also willing to think outside the box a little bit in terms of what they could be doing with their scientific careers. And so
Right.
that was, I think, a really great way that to meet co-founders, or just to meet people in general. It's like, how do you? But that's always a hard question. Is like, how do you meet people who are looking to start companies and become co-founders?
No, totally. I think the average duration of marriage in the West, it's 6-7 years, right? But founders, you have to stick around for 10 years, if not more. So finding a right co-founder is arguably more important than finding your personal, what do you call it, like your match, a partner in the personal world.
Right.
So that's why I chose my brother, because we knew a little bit too much about each other.
Ah, cool.
We know how to, like, weaknesses too much about each other's strengths.
And if you get into like a fight, then you can call your mom, and your mom will help sort it, or something like that, right?
I mean, you can, I mean, you have to, like, deep inside, you have good intentions, right? So you want each other to succeed.
Yeah.
So even if you fight, you will never reach to the point to like any bitterness.
Yeah.
Deep inside, you still love them. So I think starting with business with someone with some history always helps.
Yeah.
I mean, there will always be disagreements, but as long as you have some deep level of trust, it works out.
Yeah.
Right. If you see Y Combinator, when they invest, they look for co-founders, like the team, because they want to make sure these guys will stick around. They want to look at the progress. I think these are the two biggest things they prioritize, because they know ideas evolve, ideas change. So speaking of ideas, so you had some clarity on using Syn Bio techniques to, let's say, make cannabinoid products. Now, how do you take this idea to reality? You talked about a few components you needed to get there from A to B: access to lab space, access to equipment, access to talent, a co-founder in this case. So what you had to do to really take it from A to B?
I think it was, I want to say, like, an interesting amount of luck and some timing too.
Right.
Like we looked at the cannabinoid space in particular because like 2014 through 2018 were like a really interesting time for like Canadian cannabis industry, because it was when the medical cannabis program was created and legalization all happened. So it was a really interesting time to be thinking about what can we do in healthcare and to improve human life using those particular chemical compounds. And like for me, it's like very much a biochemistry story, as like I'm not like that excited about the cannabis industry. Like it's a cool thing, but the cannabinoid system and the way it interacts with your body there's a lot of like so much potential there to address a lot of different kind of health concerns. But the getting from A to B, like from the idea all the way to like an actual, product and something that people are willing to pay money for, was like a million different steps, and all of them were like quite complicated and often quite lucky in terms of how we found solutions to them, because we started out with almost a basic research question. Like there wasn't like established bodies of research that were looking at the cannabinoid system and how it works in a yeast cell, let's say, right? That was all of our own work that we had to do ourselves to figure out if these enzymes are going to work, how to engineer them, how to like create a system of doing that, and how to do the fermentation and all this other stuff. We had to figure out all of that ourselves. And I think we were extremely lucky to have our investors supporting us and like being able to raise more capital, even though we were always at like such an early stage, especially when we were getting started. It's just like, really like basic research. Like it's surprising how I think part of me is like surprised by it because it's very much outside the norm for an investor to look at basic research and invest, in it as a company. But at the same time, like we've proven the success of that opportunity where it's like you are going after something new that isn't really established and there is some level of research risk involved. But at the same time, like, our investors benefit from being willing to take that risk at such an early stage for a company and for a research topic in general. And that journey just continued, I guess, over the course of like, the last like 10 years essentially of doing that research, getting a lot of that basic R&D done, and then eventually like starting to see like incremental yield improvements from our yeast strains and just having that work its way up to becoming a point where it's like, okay, we can start to commercialize, think about commercializing this technology. I think in the end it took a lot more time and also a lot more capital than maybe we expected it to. Or everyone I think always wishes that it took less time and less capital to achieve something of value. But we got there eventually, and I think it was through a mix of like the right support in terms of capital and also the core team members and the people who had worked on the project that actually like put a lot of their time and thought and creativity into finding solutions for the types of scientific challenges that we were looking at. And now we can start to gradually make our way towards like, less R&D and more thinking about commercial type work and
love it.
Continuing that journey, I guess.
Love it. If you have to dumb it down to explain the Syn Bio workflow, so irrespective of what is the protein of interest or what is the material of interest, you have to identify the gene, then you have to find the host, and then you want to make sure it's more scalable to grow them in small scale, large scale. So, like, can you give your example? Like, how did you really identify your source for this gene of interest and the whole process? Like, how did you choose your host? Why yeast? Like, it's more like fungi route. And then talking about small scale growth and large scale production.
Yeah. The basic concept that we often use in synthetic biology is talking about we start with the chassis, which is like yeast.
Right.
A chassis is similar as you talk about like a chassis for a car maybe or whatever, it's your host organism, and you can choose between like a chassis that's yeast, a chassis that's bacteria, or like other kinds of things. You can invent new chassis if you want to. And that's a good way to think about it just because it is your host organism and those are the parts that you have to work with. Then when you're looking at your genes, you have, in iGEM world, we call these biobricks, and it's just biobricks.
Biobricks, yeah.
Just like
sense.
genes, biological parts, whatever, things you can assemble and piece together in different ways to make it do the thing that you want to do. In our case, it's like, 5 or 6 different genes from the cannabis plant or from other kinds of plants or other organisms that do similar kinds of chemistry, and you string those together and assemble them the way you'd assemble a bunch of Lego pieces, and put those into the yeast cell and have the yeast cell like do the thing that you want it to do, hopefully. And then you try that like a million times and it doesn't work, and then you find one that works and then you keep going. But that is the basic premise of it. And even these days, I would say it's interesting to I think when people started out 10 years ago looking at synthetic biology, the dream was always to just like write DNA on your computer and just like order it and just have it be done. For us, we were in this transition phase of that being the dream and then becoming the reality, where I think when we first started out, it was still a lot of like maybe hands-on manual labor you had to do to some extent to find the right genes and to test them and so on and so forth. And now things are advancing to the point where like ordering DNA online and having it show up at your doorstep and be ready to use in your experiments is so much more a routine thing, and it's low enough cost and fast enough service that you can really rely on it for like all kinds of things and do like, huge amounts of experiments really easily based on that. And now that things are getting more advanced, like I was chatting with some friends of mine in the synthetic biology community who are, getting a better handle of like the latest AI tools for protein folding, all kinds of stuff. So then it becomes really like a pure digital thing where a friend of mine published a paper recently that was essentially a protein that was a structure that was completely predicted digitally. And then he ordered like 2 copies of that gene and then tested them, and they worked as like a protein inhibitor for this like kinase concept that he was looking at. And that I think is like kind of cool. I feel like I was catching up a little bit on things because it was like, we can finally just do this all digitally and we don't have to like order like 10 different gene candidates and try to find the one that works. Just like, the machine, AI stuff can actually like keep up now, and we can just order like 1 copy of the thing that we are interested in and it works as expected. And that's kind of scary, but also very cool.
It's very cool. I was not debating, but I was discussing this with someone. If this AI revolution, will it reduce number of experiments or increase number of wet lab experiments? Right, I was telling him that it will reduce number of wet lab experiments because you will be able to test the hypothesis and really figure out what experiments to even run. Right, so you will do most of these things in silico, but in real life, you will, once you are sure, this is going to work, then you're going to run those experiments with more certainty, with lower error rate. Right, currently we run these experiments expecting it will fail, but I think when 2 of these worlds, digital worlds and wet lab, dry lab and wet lab, combine, you make less mistakes. Or maybe no mistakes in the future. When we get there, then I don't think it will be called experiments. It will be more engineering, right? So there are other school of thought, which is you will be doing more experiments, right? Because it will democratize running experiments too, right? So it will reduce experiments for individuals, but there'll be more individuals, or more labs, more companies, maybe solo entrepreneur starting and scaling biotech companies, right? One person doing tens of experiments, most of them in silico, few of them in the wet lab, and then going to production through collaboration. That's just a very strange world. We don't know, and we have early signs how the future of biotech will look, but we don't know if it will happen in 2 years, 5 years, or 10 years, right? So we need more ambitious entrepreneurs like you jump in rather than waiting for their PhD. Nothing wrong with doing PhD and then starting a business, right? What I'm saying is you don't need PhD. Hopefully we will have citizen scientists with no biology degree, but it's our job, the industry's job, to make things so easy and like Lego pieces, right? So I don't have to know what's going on in my laptop to use it, right? In personalized computing world. That's the hope of biotech, that every individual will be qualified to play God, right? So do their own biotech.
I think you bring up a couple of interesting things. I think one is like when we're talking about like what are the key components of like the company and synthetic biology and how do you make it work. I think a major part of that is also just knowing like what are the problems that are out there that you can solve using biotechnology or and how to approach it.
Right.
So a lot of like newer entrepreneurs that I do mentor, I think have like a much better idea of like a connection with customers and with the actual problems that they're looking to solve. And this is where like Hyasynth's approach was kind of specific, but also we had like a lot of different ideas when we first started out. I didn't really know how like industry like would work in terms of the kinds of solutions we were providing to some extent as well. Like if you wanted to develop a solution for like the forestry industry, for example, like you should try to get to know a lot of people in that industry before you try to invent a solution for that. And that's the more like, modern way of thinking about it. Whereas like I feel like in the time that Hyasynth was starting out, it was a lot of like platform type technologies. Maybe like we want to build a synthetic biology solution for like all kinds of things. But I think a major component of how synthetic biology will develop is very much oriented around like people who work in those industries who can look at biotechnology and see a real opportunity to develop something useful for them. And what I mean by that is like, let's say you're somebody who works at a cheese factory, for example, and you have a lot of like byproduct waste, or you're trying to make your cheese process more efficient. You might be somebody who grew up and understands a lot about like cheese manufacturing, but you might not be somebody who understands anything about biotechnology. And so a biotechnology solution might be something completely off the radar for you. But as the tools become more efficient and more easy to use and more easy to actually create a solution, more people can start to look at that and be like, oh, there's actually like, I can fund a bit of research there, and that'll actually lead to a useful product for me. So I think you'll have a lot more people that can actually look at, think about what a biological solution would look like for their own businesses and for their own industries. And that goes for anything like, textiles. We've seen a lot of stuff too, as well, which is exciting. And that addresses like one of the major problems, I would say, in like, the synthetic biology world as it's been developing lately, because, I think there was probably a period of time where a lot of people had seen like the interesting and exciting potential of synthetic biology and created these platforms for doing it. But the platforms need to have solutions that they're actually developing and problems they're solving. And so as opposed to the more current way of thinking, where like you can see the problem and what it is and develop a solution for that, and that have to be very specific. Which I like that approach better, where there's more awareness of what problems and solutions could exist, and that's more driven by like a customer that you're working with that understands what what solution you can provide for them, as opposed to you as a scientist, like how to do biology and you can create solutions.
100%.
But there has to be like kind of this nice involvement of both the users of the solution as well as the developers of the product, and that I think has changed a lot over time.
100%. And I really like what you just said, because I speak with early stage founders. They focus too much on tech, right? Rather than focusing on the beneficiary, rather than focusing on the problem they are solving, right? But I understand why, because there are many technical challenges. Even today, it's becoming easier and easier. But the hope is that there will be very few technical challenges. So people are starting business, starting with the problem, right? Focusing on the problem and solving it, rather than investing too much time on the tech building and figuring out those tech challenges. It will happen.
Yeah.
So starting a business will become arguably easier. And people will focus more on go-to-market, right? Even today, right? So you can build the same product. You can use apps like Lovable, right? You can use some research model, write your prompts, then go to these apps like Lovable, build the product technically within an hour, and market it. I mean, then you have to maintain it, right? You need database, and there are some tools you can even build backend, all through ChatGPT prompts. So starting a business will become very easy, but that's not even half the battle, right? So that's probably 1 or 2%. But historically, entrepreneurs spend too much time on this 1 or 2% of things. But I think now the real fight will happen in the field more. Who is good at distribution, who is good at go-to-market, right? Who is good at brand building, because these things cannot be replaced.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. And I think it's like exciting because, as a scientist who wants to do work in synthetic biology, you kind of have to ask yourself those questions of like, okay, if you want to create a solution, then you have to think about your market and like, how you're going to go about doing that. And you have to form a relationship with somebody who's like in that industry that you're in probably, and start to explore a little bit outside of your field. Because I think that was a big problem with, my experience in grad school or undergrad, is that like, the scientists were always in their own like science world, and they weren't really engaging with the like, healthcare community or with the, like industries that they were affecting, or like other kinds of, there's a lot of components to like building a successful business or a really like a scientific solution, that if you don't get a good habit of being part of your community in that way,
Right.
then you will never learn how to actually create a real solution, and nobody will know your solution exists even.
Right.
And I think that's one of the, interesting questions that synthetic biologists like do tend to like think about, because a lot of it is oriented around like, how do we make things that are useful, right?
100%.
Yeah.
And I think I'm giving example of software. Biotech is still not very accessible.
Yeah.
Right. So that's the dream, that biotech will be accessible, just like software development is becoming accessible. But we are not there yet. I think we are at least a few years away from that state where you will be able to launch your own biotech product within hours. I don't know, right? So within months.
Yeah. I mean, I would. Within hours, that'd be very exciting. Within months is already pretty amazing. Because right now, I mean, like the types of solutions that we're seeing today, if you think about like 10 or 20 years ago, we're creating things that would have normally taken decades to figure out, and now it's being done within years, which is still like kind of a long time frame for the investor. Let's say they want their fastest return possible, I suppose. But if you can start to get things validate or invalidate solutions and technologies within months or within hours or within days, whatever, like shorter time frames, then it just makes the whole everything a lot more exciting. You can kind of explore a lot of things a lot more quickly, which is like maybe coming back to your question of like, will there be more or less experiments happening? I think there will be maybe less experiments on like each individual problem, but I think people will keep doing more experiments because there's so much more value to get from each experiment that you do. After you're able to eliminate a lot of the like errors you would have made if you weren't supported by like computational models and easy DNA synthesis solutions and stuff like that, right?
No, totally. And I think biotech has too many variables. Yeah. Right. There's billions of years of evolutionary forces behind it. We still don't know everything, right? So that's the only one of the major frictions, that why it takes so much time, right? Because there are many unknowns, or there are many variables. So how to reduce those number of variables, right? That's more of a promise of tech bio, digital bio, currently too. So there are a few pieces that have to come together to really realize this vision of DIY, do-it-yourself biotech, or citizen scientist. One is you want to make these tools more accessible, right? So people don't have to spend $1 million to buy an electron microscope or some other lab instrument. Then you want to make sure you reduce number of variables through digital platforms, through AI, like what Protein Cure, what's the name of that company that helps you with protein structures and folding, right? So we need more tech bio enablers, more tools like that, and also more curious people, right? So your only limitation should be your curiosity or willingness. So once these three pieces come together, I think we will see the future of more democratized biotech.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And that's like why I think the people aspect is like one of the exciting ones for me in terms of like who's actually, how do we bring more people into our community, and what kinds of things can we do as a community to keep continuing to support each other on like that trend where like with with my work in Syn Bio Canada,
Right.
like this is very new to me, but like, I mean, I always knew about the problem of the synthetic biology community being kind of fragmented around Canada, where it's like, okay, there's like, one prof here, one prof there, maybe different departments, and they don't necessarily know each other super well. And also the students don't always get chances to like speak to each other. But there's a lot of people that are, enthusiastic about synthetic biology as like a field on its own. And so I'm excited to do work to actually bring those people together and also encourage more people to become part of that community who might be the ones that have the problems they want to find a solution for, and then also bring together the scientists as part of that community too, to provide, solutions and keep everyone up to date on the technology. And also to build systems where like we don't have to systems of collaboration where even the resources like DNA and materials and strains can be shared more freely within our community, because there's like a good network and a good sense of community where people can ask each other for things, or maybe even establish resources where there's like hubs for DNA synthesis or exchange of like strains and other kinds of resources that make it very easy for someone to do their research and to find the resources they need to like keep improving their finding solutions and reducing costs of doing the research and things like that.
Love it.
Yeah, and that's exciting and new stuff.
Yeah, it's like in software industry, you have GitHub, right? People can open source their code. So you are saying in the biotech,
and biotech there can be similar things, but with biotech you still have to handle the physical materials is one of the challenges. So there kind of needs to be like a bit of a different hubs maybe for those kinds of things, or even another resource a friend of mine likes to point to is with like server architecture and like cloud computing type stuff, where if you want to get computing power for running your apps and stuff, like that's, there's commercial solutions for that. And there's also some like, digital solutions from that are government resources that you can get access to for computing power. But for biological like resources, for biological like experimentation power, there's an interesting question of like, how do we create resources that are like that, where you can get access to either resources or even experimentation, or like, the bio foundry concepts where it's like you get access to some automation, high throughput experimentation, things like that, that are really exciting to me, is I think because it starts to ask this question of like, how do we enable more of this stuff to happen? And I love that kind of work. I think that's just something that I've always believed in, is like the power of community as opposed to just trying to solve a problem on your own,
100%. Yeah, I think it's a team sport. Syn Bio, biotech is a team sport, not the job of one person to find all the answers, especially when so many different disciplines are involved. So we will take a break in like a few minutes, but I want to wrap up the discussion on more Syn Bio community piece. So you're the president of Syn Bio Canada.
Yeah.
So what is the mission and what made you join this community, and like how do you see your priorities or role will evolve in the coming days, years?
Yeah, it's a new thing, and an exciting thing for me. I've known the founders of that organization for a little while, and my friends like Ben Scott and Samir and Kashif, they're fantastic people, and were motivated because they felt like there was a gap, for themselves, even when they wanted to, find it should be easier to make more friends and talk to people about synthetic biology that are all enthusiastic about it. And so when I found out that they were looking to transition, the board and the composition of that nonprofit into something that's a bit more like because it was just them for a little while. It became like a little talking circle as opposed to.
You mentioned Samir, like in London, Ontario.
Yeah. Samir.
I know Samir.
Yeah. Oh, there you go. Okay, good. Yeah. So very good friends, and I've known them for forever, and they're fantastic people.
Okay.
Really inspirational. And so when I found out that they were looking for a new set of directors and new leadership, like I've been following the story enough to say like, okay, like, I've got some time, I can put some time into this and see how it goes. And I always love being part of a new community project. That's just so exciting to me. And now like we're starting to bring some new activity to the organization. And partly because like, Ben and the previous team were getting a bit too busy to like keep running the thing. So it needed a bit more energy. And so in taking that role, I was like, like I'd love to help out first of all, and also like it's an exciting project and exciting time to be building that kind of community, and a massive opportunity actually to just like create better connections across Canada, whether it's just for students or even for professors or for entrepreneurs. Like I imagine it as a place where people can find their co-founders as well if they want to find things like that. And we are just starting out by hosting some community events. We have a Slack channel that people are posting papers on what they're working on, talking about different solutions for like even like Canadian vendors right now with the like trade war situation and stuff. That's like it's interesting community discussions that we're having that otherwise just like wouldn't have happened maybe. And I think the formation of that community is going to be really valuable just as we grow it, just to have those kinds of conversations and make space for that, make space for having, casual connections with researchers across the country. And eventually, like the vision for that is, to figure out, what our community is looking for and what kinds of resources we can do like as a community. There's a lot of things that I think people want, like, more funding and more government support, et cetera, et cetera. And my question is a bit like, how do we make all that happen and how do we bring people together in a way that starts to happen? But what I'd love to see, for the future of this organization in particular is like, just like lots of people like hanging out and having fun and doing cool stuff and talking about synthetic biology. And then B is like, how do we mobilize our resources to create some of the change that we want to see for ourselves as researchers and as a community. And that could be that, we bring together enough like individuals and enough like industry, enough companies that are in this field that we get more government support from Canada, because to some extent it does fit into a lot of different Canadian industries that are going to be affected by this technology. And right now there is a lot of fragmentation. Like it's not like there's a clear way for government even to provide support to this particular industry because it's a little bit disorganized. So I think through organizing ourselves, we can paint a clear picture of, what kinds of solutions we can create for Canadians and for Canadian, healthcare and for agriculture and so on and so forth, that are going to be huge. And once we start to align ourselves in that way, then we can start to see new solutions get created. You can start to see more kinds of people working together. We can start to see like government and industry and researchers collaborating at the same table, maybe to create really useful solutions that can be developed and implemented all the way from like, start to finish. And have all those pieces like at the same table is maybe one of the most powerful things we can do as a community.
Right. I think Canadian government is very supportive when it comes to more biotech research. But what the gap I see is there's no clear ministry for biotech.
Yeah.
Right. There's no clear ministry for AI too.
Yeah.
Would love to see Minister of Biotech, Minister of AI, and also all this funding. It's great to support research, but I think funding or supporting impact is arguably the better metric. But I see a lot of government funding go to patent application or IP, which is great, but if you cannot really turn this into, if you cannot commercialize it, make an impact, this is more for academic. Doing research has its role to play, but I think when it comes to industry, it would be nice if government funding really focus on the impact post-commercialization, not just building something, filing a patent. Shouldn't be like the last stop.
I think the solutions that we can start to see, get commercialized and be implemented in the real world is like a pretty major gap. I mean, that's the gap that I'm in now, which is like, how do we actually make this into a real product that people can use? And that's also a big part of the experience I want to bring to the table with this community is like, I want to see more people start to think in that way where they can envision how their new technology and their research will have like a pretty clear impact to, Canadian industries or Canadian society or individuals' lives. And I think that's like an extremely important part of this field that academics don't always emphasize, you know?
Right. I mean, Canada has all the resources you need
Yeah.
to set up your bio factories, or, they have all the land, fresh water,
Yeah, exactly.
and everything you can ask for.
Yeah.
Right. So Canada has all the right ingredients to really become a superpower.
Yeah.
At least like with bioeconomy, it should be the largest bioeconomy.
Yeah.
In Canada, we have all the right talent here, not just resources. The government looks very inclined. They are very focused on AI, bio, but I think still some improvements are needed to really make it like a top priority. And focusing on commercialization impact, like not just getting 5 more patent applications.
Exactly. Yeah. 100%. It's almost like, there's all these ingredients that we can see. Like, I agree with you. The talent is for sure there. That's actually one of the exciting things, is how much talent that Canada has that we don't make good use of, maybe. But the talent, all the ingredients are there, and it's almost like there isn't like a big pot to like mix them all together. And that's like, and maybe Syn Bio Canada is going to be that pot. We're going to start to gather all the ingredients, put them all in the pot, mix them all together, and come out with something really nice.
We need more ecosystem, like Syn Bio for sure. Let's take a break for a few minutes.
This podcast is sponsored by SciSpot, the best tech stack for modern biotech.
Cool. No, very insightful what you shared so far. What I would love to know is, if you have to give advice to aspiring them, for sure, and people are generally worried about starting aspiring biotech founders, because doing a job, getting a salary is like a drug, right? It's very comfortable.
Yeah.
Even I remember resigning from my last job, and my friends were asking, "Why are you doing this again?" I was like, "Yeah, I make more money than I can spend, but I need a purpose, bigger purpose." But I understand why people struggle to basically decide to start a company. There are many challenges, especially if you have people like more dependents, right? If you have a family, it's very hard. So how can they de-risk? How can they start? What advice do you have?
Yeah, I think being creative with, what resources you have available and like how your time goes is maybe the biggest thing, where like a biotech company doesn't have to start out by like dropping out of your PhD program and like going full steam towards something that you're not sure about. You can definitely find resources and learn a lot about what it's going to be like to be a biotech founder through different programs, and also learn about understand like your own industry that you're looking to provide a solution for as well, and work your way towards those like key components up until the point where you have enough comfort for your own situation to actually make that like full jump into the full-time startup mode, let's say. And I think it doesn't have to be like a 100% commitment right away type of thing. Like think about it for a long time and find the right team and components that make you feel good about doing it. And also like learning how to like have fun with it is also like a big part of that, because if it's something you're going to start out by spending your spare time on, like hopefully it's something that you enjoy doing, and then you can keep doing it, and you just want to make it your full-time thing anyways. You have to like want to do it, is like part of the realization I think I had in my early years of doing this stuff was like people talk about how many hours it takes to run a and I also know like startup friends who are more in the general investment banking or something like that, where they also work long hours and like work really hard and stuff. But I think the big difference is that like all the hours that I put into my startup and my own work is like hours that I want to spend. Like, I'll get home at night and like eat dinner super quick because I want to go back and keep working on my thing. And it's exciting for me. It's not like I have to do it. Like to some extent I do need to, have that level of enthusiasm, but it's something that like, I just love doing it so much that it's just, I want to keep working on it. And it's exciting to me, as opposed to just being like, hours I get paid for. Right.
Totally. I think you don't count when you're having fun. You don't count hours when you're having fun.
Yeah.
Right. So like, when you play a game or any sport activity that you enjoy, you come back home refreshed with more energy. But if someone pays you to play that game, then you will probably come back tired because that's a job, right?
Yeah.
So the challenge of a biotech, not just biotech, anyone in the professional world, whether a founder or non-founder, if you are having fun, then you don't count your hours. When I see people complaining about hours, or I understand people have other places where they get their joy from, right? But I always question if this is the right place for that person or for me, right? So if you're not having fun or if you're counting your hours, then meaning that's probably not you should be able to get your joy if you're spending 10 hours a day or 15 hours a day or 18 hours a day.
Yeah.
But if you're getting no pleasure, just leave that, right? It's not worth it. Or find a way to have joy.
Yeah. That's definitely an important reflection to have, and a big part of the decision of whether or not you should pursue that kind of startup journey, because it can be very intense at times, and you have to really embrace it for it to be a good experience.
Right. And as we are talking about aspiring founders right now, aspiring founders always worry too much. Ideas can evolve.
Yeah.
But how do you find the first idea? When you start something, you realize idea doesn't really mean much. Like if you take your example, or
I think finding the first idea is an interesting one, because I think on one hand it's like finding something that is unique or that isn't really being done quite yet,
right.
is an important part of that, because for example, I have a friend who's interested in using synthetic biology in conservation, and there's some interesting work being done in preservation of coral reefs, for example. And so there's some people that are already working in that field, doing some work. And so for my friend, if he's interested in starting a company, then it's well, why not just work for the company that exists already? And so there's an element of uniqueness that you want to be able to find, where it's okay, you're going to start your own company because nobody else is doing the work that you're excited about, which is exactly my case when I started out. Should start one, and then and now I can work at a synthetic biology company. That's a great biology company to work for in Canada. And so I was there's a uniqueness to it, and you can find what's being done or what's out there, and maybe in the end you decide to join another team as opposed to creating your own thing from scratch, right? And the creativity of finding ideas and then understanding which ones are going to be valuable or not, and how they're all going to work in terms of priority, is also a good exercise just to practice. Where if you wanted to invent a tree that you could plant in the ground and it grows into a house, that's the creative idea. It's probably kind of unique, but also you start to understand the feasibility of that, and maybe it's not a biotech solution that exists today. That'll be maybe for some years in the future at least. Then you can start to prioritize your ideas and what you think is going to become a real solution in the near term and the long term. And I feel that's a journey that I've been constantly on, where it's just even on a day-to-day business decision, it's okay, you can when is the solution going to be valuable, and is it interesting, and is it unique enough to be competitive in the market? Because the products and the industries will constantly evolve a little bit, and there's always be different kinds of competition. So you get into a good habit of coming up with your first idea, but then developing that idea, you kind of keep repeating that same process too.
Right. It's more feasibility of that idea. You can even realize it, right? AI can design a perfect drug molecule. But if you cannot make them biologically or small molecule, you cannot do compound synthesis and make that structure. What's the point? Right. So feasibility is important, and then also commercial viability. Right. What was your idea? I really liked it. Oh, grow a tree that will become a house, something like that.
Yeah, it's one of these old sci-fi things.
Yeah. So commercial viability, who will pay for that?
Yeah.
Right. So, great advice. And
I think once you start to break it down as well, you start to realize some important questions of okay, if like for me, like in yeast and cannabinoids, like it was until we existed, it was impossible to do that. Like,
Right.
but we there's one specific question that is like what makes this company successful. Like, is it possible, right?
Right.
And that's an exciting one to ask yourselves. Like, you know, this tree example I gave you, where it's like, okay, can you grow a tree? It's like it'd be like if it's possible, then like that would be an amazing solution.
Right.
And sometimes scientific question of if it's possible, and that it might be just a matter of like to get an answer or like a really great idea. Then once you answer that, we'll have maybe the market itself looks extremely clear for your, you know, like if you can synthesize the chemical, then like, you know, it'll revolutionize things. And then it's just a question of like, how do you synthesize it? And then it can be a really great conclusion to an idea exploration. It's just one key problem you have to solve.
Yeah, but I have a feeling tree house probably has a big market.
Yeah,
You know?
Housing is in demand, and
Treehouse, yeah.
exciting stuff happening in the housing market these days. So yeah,
I don't know what's going on. Canada has like one of the largest country, like second biggest country, and we have housing crisis here. It's just there's no shortage of. I know there are many pieces, right? You want to make sure people are incentivized to even make houses, and maybe biotech can solve it.
A biotech solution to the real estate problem would be an interesting one to explore. Yeah,
100%. Maybe some sleep pods, right?
Yeah.
All air controlled, and we don't want to do sci-fi here.
Yeah.
But what about like especially with your involvement or your leading Syn Bio community in Canada? So, what is the role of mentorship? Like, how important is it? Because it's just like the old days. You had to find your guru to for your spiritual journey, right? To reach that enlightenment.
Right.
I'm not the enlightened guru, by the way.
Okay. You're just a regular guru. Yeah. I got it.
Just a name. But in old days, you had to find your guru.
Yeah.
Right. And when you start a business, you need help. Sometimes you just need validation that what you are, because you're making many new decisions.
Yeah.
Right? You never made those decisions. You are forced to make legal decisions, financial decisions, hiring decisions, product decisions, sales decisions. You cannot be right in all those things, right? So you need people to tell you, yeah, from my experience, this makes sense. Sometimes ignorance helps too. You're making decisions first time, so you don't know what's not going to work, right? So you end up taking bold decisions. But I do think mentorship has a role, at least to de-risk or to give you more confidence. What do you think?
Yeah, I think mentorship is comes in a lot of different like forms and addresses a lot of different like issues that you might come up with. Because on one hand, a mentor can be somebody who's just like giving you advice and you go to every now and then. On the other hand, it could be just like your brother or like a good friend of yours who can be a good mentor to you for different kinds of problems and solutions. But I think when you have an easy way to meet people and to form those kinds of meaningful connections, and to get to know like who's out there and who can support you and get, you know, good groups of advisors, then that's a big part of like, what I want to do with the Syn Bio community as well is make it easy for people to form meaningful connections with each other and start to become like friends or mentors or mentees to one another. Because I think that's a big part of, just life in general, whether it's business or even in science. And we know that like the mentoring system, when you think about the pure academic sense, which is like a professor mentors the students, like that's a very limited view of what mentorship can be and what benefit you can get from having like great mentors. Because I think the journey of doing science is a lot more than just like publishing and finding grants and stuff like that. It might be just about like, you know, having good mentors that are fun to be around even, you know. Oh,
sorry.
Bless you. Almost.
Yeah, almost. But where do you find these mentors? What's the best way to find these mentors?
So I guess there's a lot of ways to do it. Like sometimes it is in your family, maybe just like whatever.
Yeah.
Or in friends. I think just putting yourself out there is like one thing where like, you know, being bold about like what you want to do and who you are and telling people that is a good way to like form those kinds of connections.
Totally. Too shameless.
Yeah,
to reach
a little bit
reach out.
shameless, or
Yeah.
like, you know, just being straight up about like what you're passionate about. Like if your passion is conservation for biology, like maybe you're not even working in that field yet, but if that's what you're passionate about, then you can meet some people and they'll want to hear from you too because they're also passionate about it. Like there's kind of these like specific topics where when people get excited about it, then like you make connections.
Right.
I think that's important. You know, good places, of course, like, you know, I can plug more Syn Bio Canada here and say like, come join that community and ask questions and get to meet people. I think that's the goal of the community, is to make some meaningful connections.
Right.
And we were chatting a bit earlier about the Ontario Genomics like BioCreate program as well, which is very much oriented around like providing mentors to new companies that like I'm now mentoring like I think 3 or 4 companies. I have a few more meetings next week.
We are supported by BioCreate. Loved working with mentors there.
Yeah.
It's beyond. It's not just monetary support, but gives you access to their community. It gives you access to their mentors. So really grateful for all the support.
Yeah, fantastic program and really great people that they seem to bring around the table. So
100%.
Yeah, things like that. There's all kinds of ways to get mentors and to find them and to you know, find really good ones too.
I also had great experience with Y Combinator and CDL,
Yeah.
Creative Destruction Lab. Yeah, amazing experience. Even some of our advisors right now, we met them through CDL Network.
Cool.
Sarah Warren, Mark Adams, and many others. And like, I was not expecting when we applied for CDL, we were like, yeah, that's just another accelerator. But when we managed to get access to these amazing mentors without any shares or without even in early, like CDL is completely non-profit.
Yep.
So it was exceptional experience. I think all startups should consider joining program like BioCreate, SynBio, and CDL, and if they can manage to get into IndieBio, Y Combinator, right? Amazing networks to access not just monetary support, but also to meet your next employee, next co-founder. Great advisors, mentors.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's there's so many places that, you know, you can explore to like find all those resources and great local ones and international ones as well. I've definitely benefited from a lot of those.
Totally.
For sure myself.
Why Canada, right? So why did you choose Canada to start a business? And if you talk about local ecosystem, we are sitting in this beautiful city, Montreal, arguably one of the best cities.
Yeah.
So why Montreal? Why Quebec? Why Canada?
I think it's, I mean, in the end, it's always a combination of things. Like you think about how you want to live your life and where you want to live and things like that. But we had like options to like move to the US or options to move to Europe as well as a company and just kind of exist in like a different ecosystem entirely. But Montreal was special for me because I love the city. It's like good culture, lots of arts, lots of things I can be enthusiastic about, and actually just enjoy life and not have like, you know, a lot of pressure from even things like, you know, rent or cost of living and stuff like that. Like I think it's just a fantastic city for just to live in as like a starting point. And then Montreal as like a scene for biotechnology and synthetic biology. Like it's an interesting place in that like there's a few schools, the academic scene here has had a lot of support for synthetic biology over the course of like a long time now. And so it is one of the cities in, you know, definitely in Canada, if not the world, that actually has a good presence of synthetic biologists who have graduated from like pretty specific programs for synthetic biology, and that makes a good like recruitment pool for a new company that's in SynBio and so on. It's always a thing to consider. And then like thinking more broadly about Canada as a whole, it's a great place to. It's a great place for, let's say, like getting access to really high quality talent and for doing research and for like inventing things and having a little bit less of, and having a good balance, I would say, of some of like the venture capital style of like the US, but also like some of the practicality of like what you're actually building and is it useful kind of thing. Like, you know, for example, I've seen like companies in California in similar fields like ours, like raise $50 million and then 2 years later they're bankrupt, you know, like that's like, if that's the journey that you want to be on, like that's the place to go for that. And like, I've got friends there and I love them, and it's like, it's a different journey. But at the same time, if you want to build something that is going to like last for a long time and be a real solution for people, and focus a bit more on that, then, you know, maybe you're in Canada, like you'll be less pressured to maybe raise those kinds of capital, or you'll be able to access the more like government type funding as opposed to going like pure venture capital. And the attitude of the investors here is a little bit different. There is a bit more like practicality to the investor perspective. Like I've heard from a few different founders where like, oh yeah, if you pitch in the US, you just add a few zeros to your pitch deck. If you pitch in Canada, you take off a few zeros because they just want to see more realistic numbers for like what you actually want to achieve and what you believe that you can achieve, as opposed to just seeing like the biggest potential possible, right? And those are the kinds of things I think make Canada like really suited, especially for like maybe biotechnology and synthetic biology in this stage of where, you know, we kind of need to have more entrepreneurs who are able to bootstrap companies, who are able to do more stuff and develop practical solutions, and who are able to show those solutions in real life and and have like good, clear examples of that. Just because there's, you know, maybe there's like a bit of we've seen a timeline of synthetic biology companies that have gone from like excitement to like, you know, bankruptcy and like cycles of that. Of like, okay, but you know, we want to see stuff that is going to be real and make real products and solve real problems. And I think Canada is like, you know, a great place for that, and a great place for people who have that mindset of practicality to their work.
Yeah, no, totally. I think Canada is arguably the best place to do R&D. Yeah. Right, and accessing talent at a reasonable price. In the US, when you raise hundreds of millions of dollars, then obviously you have to spend that money because your investors want you to close your next round so they can get some returns. So it's
and that system has its advantages as well. But like it's also like, do you want to live on that path, or do you want to live on a path that is like a bit more like practical and realistic, you know?
There are pros and cons, right? So sometimes you have to be open to lose $1 billion. Right. So for that you need unrealistic confidence, ambition, right? So for that you need money like that. You have to raise more money. So there are many pros. That's why America managed to create, or companies in the US managed to create OpenAI, Facebook, Google, Amazon, the whole FANG group. So there are definitely pros and cons for sure. But yeah, I mean, Canada is one of the best places to do R&D for sure.
Yeah.
Cool. Can we do rapid fire? Quick, fun rapid fire.
Let's do it.
Alrighty, rapid fire. Oh, it's related to what we are talking. If you had unlimited funding, what will you work on? Unlimited money. Oil money. I'm joking.
Unlimited money. Interesting question. Because I get asked that question all the time, actually. It's like typical classic investor question. And I think it's like, if you have unlimited funding, I would like, you know, like pay all my scientists a lot more money, and like just have like a lot of people on getting really good salaries on who are doing research. That is amazing. And that's one thing. I think unlimited funding, you can ultimately sort of achieve anything that you really want to achieve. It's a bit of a weird question. I think, where am I going with this? There's like a practicality to that question where it's like, I want to use that funding in the most specific way to address specific solutions, and like kind of always have that be like bounded. Like, okay, I know that with unlimited funding, you can spend unlimited money on like a problem that is maybe really hard, but I think every problem can have like a dollar figure attached to it, where it's like, okay, like, you know, cannabinoid stuff, like sure, like $12 million solution. Like it'll cost you $12 million, you'll have the solution to that industry. That's one thing. And if you had more money, that's like, why do you have more money? There's no point.
Right.
Use it to develop something
But
else.
if we take a few steps back and ask the same question and we focus just on your cannabinoid, lab-grown cannabinoid.
Oh yeah, this one is like, then you would have like a world with like fermenters in every country that are all producing like regular amounts of cannabinoids for pharmaceutical use and for healthcare use, and had that be like a low cost and easy accessible solution. And then, something like, 1 in 3 people suffer from some kind of like sleep disorder at night, and that number will go from 1 in 3 to like 1 in 10 maybe. If you
will the world be more happier? That's not psychoactive, right? Cannabinoid is.
Yeah, it depends on there's it's the links between cannabinoids and like let's say depression, anxiety type stuff, like that's very common, THC being one of the main ones, but CBD being the other important one. And would the world be net overall happier with more cannabinoids around? Yes, but if you have to implement that in a way that makes sense, and that's like you can't just like give people a lot of weed and and hope that things turn out okay. We can do things like in a more scientific way that we can measure and really benefit people and address certain.
So you envision bioreactors everywhere producing cannabinoid products, more like a kitchen utensil, or more industry bioreactors?
Probably more industry type stuff. Kitchen bioreactors, that's more of a broader vision of like, okay, every kitchen should have a little bioreactor that's producing,
that would be cool,
useful like ingredients for health and food and whatever. Like you could have a kitchen bioreactor that maybe one day you're producing cannabinoids from it, maybe the next day you're producing insulin from it, and that's
or lab grown meat,
or the next day you're producing meat from it. Yeah, all kinds of things like that.
Who will clean it? Yeah.
It'll be your
robot.
I imagine a future where it's like your old grandma who has the old recipes, but they also know how to use the bioreactor kind of thing. And that's like the grandma's old recipe for bioreactor cleaning is like in 100 years will be the future.
Those grandmas and grandpas will be, I think, from this generation.
Yeah.
Okay, what is the most unexpected application of Syn Bio you have come across? Something crazy.
Something
really
crazy. Something crazy that I've seen. Okay. I think one of the craziest ones that I've seen that I think is also like really exciting is using synthetic biology to produce light, essentially.
Produce light?
Yeah.
Like for photosynthesis or photosynthesis?
No, like think about it more like glow sticks.
Got it. Like fluorescent.
Like fluorescent type stuff and luminous type stuff. Like glow sticks will glow on their own. They're not like fluorescents. Like they're a light source on their own, right? And you can do that with like the engineered fireflies. The concept, right? The genes in fireflies will do that. So you put that into a yeast or a bacteria, and you can get glowing things. And that's like the basic concept. But making that into a practical solution. And something that like industries find relevant, and like why does that need to exist? Like there's been visions from people like over the past 15 years of like, oh, we'll make like a plant that glows in the dark, and so you have this like a light instead of a lamp, or a glowing plant instead of a lamp, let's say, which is a bit too futuristic. But the idea of pursuing ways that we can improve the amount of light that can be generated from like a biotechnology solution, and actually remove some of like the because glow sticks are basically chemicals that you go into the garbage and then pollute everywhere. Makes sense. If you have a biological solution, it'll degrade and become part of the environment. That's a lot more chill. And then you can think about like what other applications where would a biological solution be more useful than a chemical one. And so like fishing lures might be another one where you can have a fluorescent fishing lure that will attract fish and make fishing better than using like a chemical fluorescent thing that you put in the ocean.
2 more minutes,
anyways,
awesome.
That company is called Light by Nyoka, or Lux Bio actually.
Lux Bio.
Yeah, Lux Bio.
What do they do?
They do the fluorescence. The glow.
For any product or?
glowing, like glow sticks and other kinds of glowing products, but
Love it.
biological solutions.
Maybe
for that.
they want to share this with, or pitch this to Elon Musk. He will make his Tesla cars glow. He would totally do it.
Yeah, Elon Musk is not too hot these days, but yeah, something like that.
So if you had to bet your entire career on one biotech trend, what would it be?
If I bet my entire career on one biotech trend, it is that people are going to get better at coming together and creating solutions for that are in biotechnology.
Totally. I think there will be less technological challenges.
Yeah.
So we need more humans, more collaborators.
More people, more collaborations, more senses of community, more different kinds of people like at the table when it comes to like creating the solutions, and different stakeholders that are involved on the environment level, people from indigenous cultures that are part of the environment, conservation type stuff as well. There's all kinds of things that that community is going to keep getting better at connecting with each other. And that is going to lead us to a lot more solutions than just one.
It's awesome, man. Really enjoyed speaking with you. Learned so much. If people want to contact you, either to join Syn Bio Canada community or to learn more about Hyasynth Bio, what's the process?
I'm always on LinkedIn. That's always a good option. And then synbiocanada.org is the place to join Syn Bio Canada.
Got it. Love it. Thanks, man. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.